stories making headlines this hour. A day after carrying out a surprise reshuffle of a presidential staff, President Park Geun-hye proposes roundtable negotiations with political leaders in an attempt to put aside partisan wrangling and focus on creating new jobs and ending corruption. Some welcome news on the Korea's economic front, citing improvements in facility investments, employment, and exports. The government says the Korean economy appears to be on a recovery trajectory. Plus, a nuclear crisis in Japan. The nation's watchdog warns that Japan faces an emergency as a tsunami-stricken Fukushima nuclear plant is releasing highly radioactive water into the ocean. With these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Tuesday, August 6th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We start at the nation's top office. A day after carrying out a surprise reshuffle of some of her presidential staff, President Park Geun-hye appeared determined for a fresh start on this Tuesday.
Our Han-daeun starts us off with what the Korean leader told her senior officials in her first cabinet meeting since coming back from summer holiday.
President Park Geun-hye, who replaced half of her senior secretaries Monday, is looking to start anew. During the first cabinet meeting after her summer break on Tuesday, the leader made clear that change will only come once the cycle of bad practices is broken and one that emphasizes values based on firm principles takes its place. Such remarks, pundits say, are partly aimed at her outgoing senior aides who failed to bring about change. Her former senior secretaries failed not only to take responsibility for a string of scandals involving presidential officials, but also to produce tangible results of her key policies, which include the president's vision of a creative economy, as well as employment and welfare reforms. Also mentioning the corruption case in the nuclear power industry that led to halted operations at numerous power plants, the president reiterated the importance of stamping out corruption between firms and high-ranking officials.
공무원들이 과거에 안주하지 않고 과거의 잘못된 관행을 고치는 것을 두려워하지 않고 새로운 변화와 도전에 적극 나서며 개혁에 동참할 수 있도록 해 주시기를 바랍니다.
The comments reflect her strong drive for political reform and her determination to expand the presidential shakeup to the cabinet in general. President Park, who also replaced her senior secretaries for civil affairs, future strategy, and employment and welfare affairs, reaffirmed that the ultimate goal of her push for change is to improve the livelihoods of the people. Han-daeun, Arirang News.
And more from the nation's top office. President Park has proposed five-way talks with the leaders and floor leaders of the nation's ruling and opposition parties to resolve partisan wrangling.
The proposal comes after the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition Democratic Party each suggested three-way and one-on-one talks with the president respectively. The ruling Saenuri Party welcomed President Park's counter-proposal, while the Democratic Party has yet to respond. Meanwhile, the president voiced her opinion on the missing transcript from the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit for the first time since it became a political hot potato. She called the disappearance of the transcript an attempt to, quote, shake national discipline and erase history, and said it should never have happened in the first place. And after days of waiting, North Korea on Tuesday responded to South Korea's final offer of dialogue over the Kaesong Industrial Complex through its state media.
Pyongyang's Rodong-Sinmun placed blame squarely on Seoul for the breakdown in talks for focusing more on cooperating with foreign powers than on improving relations with the North. And meanwhile, the regime's state-run television broadcast a special program on the joint inter-Korean complex on Monday, referring to it as one of former leader Kim Jong-il's greatest achievements. Some analysts say the broadcast indicates North Korea's willingness to keep the joint industrial complex running. South Korea offered its final proposal for talks on the Kaesong factory zone last Monday. Just last night, some 40,000 people worldwide used a service that offers accommodation in more than 190 countries across the globe. But this is not an extension of a hotel chain.
The beds the people will be sleeping in were provided by private individuals as part of a rental activity called the sharing economy. For more on this fast-growing trend, our Kim Ji-yeon joins us live in the studio. So, Ji-yeon, what does this mean when we say the sharing economy?
It's a peer-to-peer marketplace, and the best comparison would be online shopping, something resembling the Amazon and eBay websites. But there is one prominent difference. As the name suggests, the sharing economy includes the element of sharing. The core element of the concept is that people are renting and sharing things with one another, things like bedrooms and cars. Take a look.
Airbnb is a US-based web service founded in 2008 that aims to make it easier for people to connect and lend out space inside their homes at a low price. Its service operates in more than 190 countries and is the most prominent example of a huge new sharing economy in which people rent assets directly from each other, coordinated through the internet.
To stay in this traditionally built Korean-style home, it's $80. This is all possible due to home-sharing websites like Airbnb, which connects people like you and me to share their homes.
Joe Gabbia, the co-founder of Airbnb, says that now is a great time to start a startup business like his, with the emergence of mobile devices and smartphones that instantly connect people around the world.
The reason that this is such a great time to get an idea out there into the world, to start a company, is that the cost to do so has never been so low. You actually don't need investment to get an idea off the ground.
Meanwhile, there's another startup company called Korea Car Sharing that provides a platform to share electric vehicles for the members of the public. Founder and CEO Ha Ho-sun said that technological developments have allowed the convergence of the appropriate hardware and software, providing the best platform for a startup company.
Right now, the timing is good with high demand for cheaper and environmentally friendly ways for transport. Also, the technological advances make it easier for us to operate as platform providers for electric vehicles.
Right, Ji-yeon, so what are the benefits of taking part in the sharing economy?
There are several. First, owners of underused assets can make money from them, while the people who are renting those assets pay less than they would have if they were to buy the item outright or opt for more traditional ways of consumption. For sociable souls, it is a channel to meet new people, and there are environmental benefits. Renting a car when you need it rather than owning one means fewer cars on the road and therefore less pollution, which is one of the reasons the Seoul metropolitan government is embracing the sharing economy trend. Listen to Seoul Mayor Park Geun-hye, who was a keynote speaker at the Smart Cloud Show in Seoul last Thursday.
In this age, with the lack of resources and more concerns for our environment, sharing is a viable solution and is already seen as an evolving way of life.
The Seoul City Mayor also added that the sharing economy is the way to go for a new pattern of consumption in the near future. In response, the city of Seoul declared itself a sharing city last September and is actively working toward this vision and goal.
Well, those benefits certainly do sound really great, but what are some of the drawbacks?
Well, the main concern is regulatory uncertainty. I mean, the laws that currently dictate and govern business activity may not fully reflect the trend of sharing. And for instance, home or room sharing services are regulated in many countries with laws that prohibit individuals from periodically leasing out rooms. And that also applies to car sharing and carpooling services. The founder and CEO of Korea Car Sharing, Ha Ho-sun, offered an example, and he said that it's currently illegal in Korea to share automobiles with others without a license from the municipal government. He also added that his company receives financial support from the government, but said that there's still a lot of room for improvement.
In order to expand our services to other areas in the country, we have to apply separately for a license in that municipal government, and that takes a lot of time and money. That also affects the quality of our service to the public.
Ha also said that there are many people who use their vehicles that want to be able to move around freely rather than be restricted to the city of Seoul.
Now, if the mayor is on board with this idea, while the laws are not, how is Seoul responding to this fairly new concept of sharing economy?
They do acknowledge that, to a certain degree, that the current laws are not reflecting the so-called sharing economy. But they said that they're working to change that. I met with Kim Ji-young, who works for the Social Innovation Division in the Seoul Metropolitan Government, which was set up last year to achieve Seoul's vision of a sharing city.
Trying to seek more cooperation with other municipal governments and state-run institutions that have shown an interest in our vision of sharing. For example, last year, the municipal government of Gwangju and the Busan Development Institute showed an interest in our Sharing City initiative and asked for help in achieving that goal.
Whether it's homes or cars, startup companies are using the sharing economy and finding ways to utilize the world's idle assets and provide a platform to make them more resourceful. The city of Seoul seems to embrace this new trend by responding to the company's needs.
Well, it certainly seems like a win-win trend. Thanks so much, Ji-yeon, for bringing that to us.
My pleasure.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Came on the news. We're trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
Some welcome news on the economic front. In its monthly report on economic conditions, the Korean government said for the first time this year, the economy appears to be on a road to recovery for the second half of the year. Arirang's economics correspondent Park Geun-hye has the numbers.
Recent economic indicators are raising hopes that the Korean economy will find its way back to recovery in the second half of this year. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said in its Green Book on Tuesday that the nation's economy is showing positive signs amid stabilizing prices and expanding employment. This is the first time this year that the Finance Ministry has used the term recovery in its monthly report that assesses economic conditions. The book went on to say that major economic indicators such as production and investment improved recently. The economy created 360,000 more jobs in June from the same period a year earlier, while facilities, investment, and industrial output rose 4.5% and 0.4% in June from the previous month. Exports are also turning around. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy data shows that the country's exports rose 2.6% last month from the same period last year. Exports dropped 1% in June. The Finance Ministry, however, cited the Federal Reserve's planned stimulus tapering as a factor that could have a negative impact on the Korean economy. The ministry also acknowledged that the recovery in the second quarter came largely from government stimulus measures, saying such government spending has limitations in boosting economic growth. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the April to June period from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in 9 quarters. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Sales of imported automobiles hit a new record high here in Korea last month. Data from the Korea Automobile Importers and Distributors Association shows that nearly 15,000 foreign brand cars were sold in July, up nearly 40% from the same month last year. Sales from the January to July period were up 23% year-on-year. The trade association attributes the steep rise to aggressive marketing by overseas automakers and the growing popularity of foreign cars in Korea. German automaker BMW topped the list with over 3,000 units sold, followed by Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi.
It's been 2.5 years since the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, but problems there are as serious now as they have ever been. Japan's nuclear safety agency says highly radioactive groundwater is rising toward the surface and what is being called an emergency that the plant's operator cannot handle. Kim Hyun-bin has more on the nuclear fallout.
Japan's tsunami-crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant is facing yet another emergency, as highly radioactive groundwater appears to have risen above an underground barrier meant to contain it. The head of the country's Nuclear Regulatory Authority Task Force, Shinji Kinjo, told Reuters on Monday that the leak was an emergency, but he was worried the plant's operator, TEPCO, had no sense of how to deal with it. He went on to say the highly radioactive groundwater is likely seeping into the sea. In a recent news conference, TEPCO General Manager Masayuki Ono said the situation was bleak.
We understand that this discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
To prevent further leaks, plant workers are injecting chemicals to create an underground barrier to block groundwater from leaking out to the ocean. But experts say the barrier may not be enough, as it needs certain conditions to solidify. A retired nuclear engineer who worked on several TEPCO nuclear plants says the company is out of its depth.
The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle. They are doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions.
Some Japanese media outlets have predicted the contaminated water could breach the ground surface in a matter of just a few weeks. Just last week, TEPCO estimated a cumulative 20 to 40 trillion becquerels of radioactive tritium may have leaked into the sea since the nuclear disaster some 2.5 years ago. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Sometime in the not too distant future, we may not be able to get a meat in the traditional way. By slaughtering animals, we may be able to grow it in a petri dish. Our Kim In-ji reports on the world's first lab-grown meat patty and gives us an idea of what people really think about the taste and texture.
The world's first test tube burger has been unveiled to the public. With features similar to a regular meat patty, this artificial patty is actually produced from 20,000 tiny strips of laboratory-grown meat, combined with other ingredients such as salt, breadcrumbs, and egg powder. Red beet juice and saffron have also been added to give the meat its color. Scientist-turned-chef Professor Mark Post from Maastricht University in the Netherlands produced a synthetic meat, which cost an outstanding $325,000 to produce, as part of a project aimed at showing the meat grown in laboratories can reduce environmental impact and meet the growing demand for meat. Critics who tasted the meat at an event in London said that it tasted close to meat, but wasn't as juicy as they'd expected.
I was expecting the texture to be more soft, but there's quite some intense taste. It's close to meat. It's not that juicy, but the consistency is perfect. I miss salt and pepper.
One critic waxed on about the experience of sampling the futuristic food.
The texture, the mouthfeel has a feel like meat. What Hani was just saying, the absence is, I feel like the fat. Like it's a leanness to it. But the bite, feels like a conventional hamburger.
Professor Post believes that his new creation could bring about a revolution in the artificial meat market, with food products such as his appearing in supermarkets in less than a decade.
The texture is very similar, slightly different because the fibers are smaller, but it's very, very similar. And the taste is good. It tastes like meat. It's not quite there, but it's getting there, and this is a very good start for future improvement.
The World Health Organization says meat production is expected to rise 376 million tons by 2030, and demand for meat from the global population is likely to exceed production. Professor Post's creation will likely pave new roads in food production as the stem cells from one animal can produce 1 million times more meat than the meat from the same animal ever could. 김민지, 아리랑 뉴스.
Here's a question. Is South Korean football player Park Ji-sung finally on the move?
The midfielder has been at the center of transfer talks that would send him back to his former team, PSV Eindhoven. Stephen Che is standing by at the Sports Center to tell us more. So, Stephen, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Park Ji-sung, Korea's most famous footballer in recent years, is indeed going back to PSV Eindhoven after signing an agreement with them earlier on Monday. According to a source close to Park, he agreed to a one-year deal that will send him to the Dutch team on loan from the EPL's Queen's Park Rangers. The 32-year-old will receive the maximum salary of 1 million euros. That's about 1.3 million US dollars from PSV and about $450,000 from QPR. Park returns to the team he started his European career with 8 years ago and will be called upon to provide veteran leadership to the young squad. And shifting over to Major League Baseball, New York Yankees star slugger Alex Rodriguez is planning to fight a ruling that would force him to hang up his cleats until the end of the 2014 season. Major League Baseball handed out suspensions to 13 people, including A-Rod, for their connection to the use of performance-enhancing drugs and Biogenesis, an alleged provider of PEDs. A-Rod was hit with the hardest fine with a 211-game suspension, while the other 12 players were given 50-game bans. Rodriguez said he'll appeal to an arbitrator who will likely review the case in November or December, meaning the Yankee third baseman will get to play the rest of this season. And sliding home, it's time to take a look at Tuesday's KBO action. The 5th-place Lotte Giants and the 6th-place Kia Tigers went head-on at Busan's Tajik Stadium. The visiting Tigers placed Henry Sosa on the mound, while the Giants gave the ball to lefty Shane Newman, who's having a fine season so far. The Fu 2-4 Nationals held tight until the top of the 4th when Kia's Najiwan's ground out to first brought home the runner from third, Kia up 1-0. In the bottom of the inning, the Giants began to stomp. Chun Jun-woo's smacks a double to right, bringing home a run, while the very next batter, Jang Sung-ho, hits a single, scoring another. Lotte up 2-1. Next inning, Lotte begins to rack up the score as Sonha-seop's double brings home 2 more. Lotte up 4-1. And Lotte holds on to take this one with a final score of 5-3. And looking at the scores from around the league, we have LG defeating NC 5-1 and Tusan taking down Nexon 5-4. Meanwhile, SK and Hanwha had their game rained out. That's it for me in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Choi. Check back in at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Time now to go over to our Kwon So-ah for the latest weather forecast. So, good evening.
Good evening, guys. You know, if I hadn't known any better, I might have thought it was the middle of night already earlier in the day.
Yes, I heard that from a lot of the people today. The weather seemed picture perfect for a horror movie.
I totally agree to that. It may have felt like horror for those people that were outside during the storms. On the other hand, for some, the extreme heat might have made them feel as though they were in a horror film, especially in Ulsan, where the daytime high hit 36.9 degrees, the highest temperature there in 17 years. And now the heat wave alerts have spread to nearly all parts of the country. An advisory has also been issued in the nation's capital today, and warnings dominate much of the southern half of the country. Now, due to the rising temperatures, we've got chances of sudden showers again, most likely in the central regions tomorrow during the afternoon, so keep your umbrellas ready. Also, be ready for these high numbers. The capital Seoul should soar up to 33 degrees, same as in Busan. Now, Daegu will be extremely hot at 36, and as you can see by the morning lows, it's expected to be a tropical night again, so be prepared for that as well. Now, Daesan and Jeju Island will top out at 35 and 34 degrees respectively, while Dokdo and Monkumgang will be a bit more endurable. So stay safe in the sudden showers, everyone, and try to find ways to beat the heat. And if you need another update, I'll be right back here after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.